In this exercise, we're going to look at guides, snaps, and grids. So this is our guides button here. This is for snap guides. This is hide show tracker, and this these numbers near my cursor, that's the tracker, and these are my snap grid. Let's look at guides to start with. So let's look here. If we click on this little arrow, there are options with our guides, so we can create a guide segment. So that creates a small part of a guide. It's going to be easier for us to deal with our guides if we turn off the grid snap. So just turn that off temporarily. When we go near a guide, you'll see that it highlights. A little dot appears here. If we click and drag that, we can move our grid, and if we hit the Control key once, we can copy it. We can also create orthogonal guides just by pulling them off from the sides of our drawing. So just up here's a little tab, you pull that down, we pull that up, and when we move near one of these grids, the dot appears, so we can drag that, hit the Control key once, drag it again, drag another one, hit the Control key. So we've got a series of guides. If you get your line tool, you'll find it's very easy to draw from one guide to another. Notice that the cursor changes. We've got that Mercedes-Benz cursor, and then when we get to the end, you get that little dot. That means that we're snapped to that grid. So this becomes a very accurate way of drawing because it's snapping to those guides. Back to our arrow tool. So I'm going to select a guide, so there's the dot there, drag that, and the trash can appears, or the rubbish bin. Move near the trash can, drop the guide onto the trash can, and it deletes. So here, let's drag that down, and that's a way of getting rid of specific guidelines. If you want to remove all of your guidelines, just click on this downturn arrow, remove all guidelines, they've all gone. Let's turn that one off. This is our snaps. So we can snap to guides, we can snap to points, we can snap halfway along an object. So if we turn off the snaps, it becomes very difficult to snap to the ends of our line. Let's look at half. So when we have half snap on, we move near an object and there's a vertical line there halfway along the object. If we choose divisions, we get 3 divisions, 2 vertical lines there. If we choose distance, then we would get distance along. So that's 1 meter along, 2 meters along, and so on. Back to half. Down the bottom, we have the option to set our snap point values. So here we've got 3 divisions, maybe you want that to be 5. We've got our percentage, maybe we want that to be 25%. We've got a distance, maybe we need that to be 500 millimeters or 24 inches. So we've still got the half. Let's go back to our options here. Now we have 5 divisions. So we touch there, it divides that evenly into 5. Back to half. These are the options for our tracker. So we can expand the tracker automatically, or if we don't want to see the tracker, we can turn that off. But if we turn that off and create an object, how do we know how big that object is? So the tracker is really useful for giving us feedback about the size of objects. And lastly, let's look at our grid snap. So we have the ability to snap to a snap grid. We can snap to a construction grid. We can show our construction grid. There it is there. And we can snap to our construction grid. So you'll notice there's a dot there on my construction grid, another dot there, another one there, another one there, and so on. So when we create a building and we snap to our construction grid, that's snapping 2 meters at a time. At the moment, we have an orthogonal grid. We can set a rotated grid, so I can click, click, and now my grid is rotated, and now when I draw, it draws along that grid. So if I want to draw walls, change your wall mode to this one so that you can snap along the grid, and then you can snap to another grid position. Then you might want to go back to an orthogonal grid and then draw another building which is snapping to that orthogonal grid. If you want to control or change the grid snap, that's this one here, go to View, Grid and Editing Plane Options, Grids and Backgrounds, just this one here. So this is our settings for our grid. At the moment our construction grid is 2 meters apart. So if you're doing construction work, maybe you want to have your grids every 3 feet, maybe every meter. We also have the ability of our snap grid. Maybe we're going to make that every 4 inches or 100 millimeters. But be careful. If you turn on your snap grid, it is likely that you can have problems when you're trying to draw. As I was making this movie, when I had my snap grid turned on, I found it almost impossible to select my guidelines and move them. So sometimes you might want to turn the grid off. When you have the settings you want, click OK, and back to your snap grid. So just remember, quite often you might want to turn that off, so not show the construction grid, and turn off the grid snap if you're having trouble selecting objects or drawing the shape or the size of things that you want.